This is DW News Africa. Coming up, angry, fearless, and demanding change. Protesters in Madagascar say enough is enough as they defy a government crackdown. They are calling on the president to resign or make changes to better their lives. And in the Gambia, tensions at sea are turning violent as local fishermen battle foreign-owned trawlers. The so-called sea war is seen as a fight for fish, livelihoods, and survival off West Africa's coast. Hello there, I am Eddie Micah Jr., and you are welcome to the program. Youth protesters in Madagascar are rejecting dialogue and doubling down on their demands. The protests began over power and water shortages, but have grown into a broader movement against poverty and corruption. The protesters accuse President Andry Rajoelina's government of repression after weeks of unrest that has claimed over 20 lives. The demonstrations have become the biggest challenge to Rajoelina since his re-election in 2023, in a country grappling with deep economic hardship.
Madagascar's youth are rising, and they're not backing down. They sing the national anthem, not in celebration, but in resistance. It's been 2 weeks of protests, and the movement is only growing.
We are here to claim our rights because in Madagascar we don't have the right to express ourselves. Whereas in other countries, as you can see, there are Gen Zers everywhere. They are not arrested. They protest peacefully, and we are trying to do the same.
The crackdown has been harsh. The UN says over 20 have died, more than 100 injured. Madagascar's youth say they had enough. Even medical students have joined the protests and are helping the injured. They demand better pay, better conditions, and basic respect.
We're here because the system is flawed. The healthcare system is flawed, and that has repercussions for all Madagascans. We're not the only ones here. We're in good health. But Madagascans, we think of your families, we think of your parents, we think of your children. That's why we're here.
President Andry Rajoelina is a former youth protester himself. Back in 2009, he led an opposition movement against the then president. Now he finds himself in a similar position. Under pressure, he fired his cabinet and named a former military general to lead his new government. General Safisambo is no stranger to power. Previously, he served in several roles in the government, including the Prime Minister's office. Protesters say this isn't change, it's control. They want much more.
The accumulation of problems provokes a revolution, and that's why the state has lost control. This is a revolution, not a simple removal of the president. No, it's a revolution. And the only solution to a revolution is to accept the people's demands.
On Wednesday, the president met with civil society groups, though the anti-government movement stayed away. At the gathering, Rajoelina made this bold offer.
I pledge that we will do everything in our power to accelerate the energy transition in Madagascar and implement all of the projects. If there are still power cuts in Madagascar within a year, I will resign.
But many here say they've heard it all before. Madagascar has seen this cycle in 1972, 2002 and 2009. Each time, protests led to political shake-ups. This time, protesters say they want more than just a new face in power. They want true change and a system that works for everyone.
Right, so the youth protesters set an ultimatum for the president to resign and called for a general strike. I spoke earlier to Pulitzer Prize-winning Malagasy journalist Gail Borgia, who was at that national dialogue called by the president.
The meeting had been presented by the president as a major moment of truth, a space where he encouraged people to speak honestly and not hold back. But the Gen Z movement didn't want to take part in this event. The president said, I want you to tell me what's hurting you, what you care about. I want you to be honest. I don't want flattery or to be told only what I want to hear. So he seemed sincere. He seemed to really be open. But the Gen Z said that it's a fake dialogue, that repression is still going on. So that's why they don't want to be a part of this.
Right. Tensions clearly still high. Can you just take us back a bit? Tell us about the main issues that sparked the wave of protest in Madagascar in the first place.
It started with an MP who protested in the street and who was repressed. So that was the origin of the movement. It comes from an MP, an opposition MP. And then members of the town council, opposition members, wanted to organize a street protest. So they asked for the authorization to the authorities and they were denied. And when they wanted to talk with a senator, with a female senator about power cuts, about water cuts, and they got arrested. And that's what launched the whole movement. And then Gen Z took over. So it was quite quick. It happened in 2 weeks, but no one expected the young people to take part in this, because first it was more political.
Right. I mean, look, the Prime Minister accuses protesters of plotting a coup just, because of the sheer numbers of protesters out there, while also he installed a military general as Prime Minister. How's that being received in the country?
It's not well received, especially by the Gen Z movement. They say that it confirms how the government thinks, how the president thinks. It confirms the will of repression against protesters. So they basically they were not really interested in this new prime minister nomination. They asked for the president to resign immediately. So whoever the prime minister was, they wouldn't be happy anyway. But of course, they would have preferred someone from the civil society. For them, it's not a good sign regarding the way the government sees the protests, the will of dialogue from the government. So they see this as a sign of repression, as the sign that the government changed anything. So they say that whatever the president might say, it's lies. Because at the end of the day, they nominate someone in the army.
Right. So protesters are refusing talks as long as authorities use force. What are they demanding exactly?
What they don't want to talk with the president the way it is organized. So that's why they didn't want to take part in this dialogue proposed by the president. They said, we reject this mockery of dialogue. We refuse the president's invitation to come and talk, and we will not engage with a regime that represses, beats, and humiliates young people in the streets. They wrote that on their Facebook page. They said, we don't extend a hand to a government that every day crushes those who rise up for justice. And what they demand is clearly said on their Facebook page. They want the right to protest freely. They want the dissolution of the Senate. They want a public apology from the president for the protesters who were shot dead. They want an end to threats against youth and opposition leaders. investigations into acts of violence against protesters. So they have a lot of demands, and for the moment they think there is no response from the authorities.
Right. That just makes me want to find out this. Give us an idea what civil society is generally like in Madagascar. Is it more common that citizens can effectively contribute to democratic governance and accountability?
From what I see, the civil society is very active. They have been active for years. They have been fighting against corruption, against injustice. They issue statements. They really try to alert the government, to say things are going wrong, and they are not really listened to. And usually people say that young people are not really interested in politics. They don't go and vote. They are not really interested. So this movement, this Gen Z movement, was really unexpected. No one could have expected this protest, this massive protest. It was organized in a week. So there is a very active civil society, but they never protested. I've never seen a street protest in years. So this was really unexpected.
Right. Gail Borgia, journalist in Antananarivo. Thank you.
Thank you.
In the Gambia, tensions at sea are turning violent in a standoff between local fishermen and foreign-owned trawlers. One local industry official called the growing number of incidents a sea war. Desperate local fishermen are attacking foreign trawlers and even turning on each other over the waters of West Africa. Fishermen accuse the trawlers of encroaching into unauthorized areas off Gambia's coast and sabotaging their equipment. A warning, our next report contains images of injuries that you may find disturbing.
We are going to call the authority.
Off Gambia's coast,
Try to go up. Here is not your zone.
local fishermen are locked in a running battle with foreign-owned trawlers for control.
You destroy our nation.
A fight fueled by dwindling stocks and global demand, with devastating consequences for some of those caught in the crossfire. These injuries are the result of an arson attack on an Egyptian-owned vessel in July last year. Both men are Gambian crew members.
I feel the heatness. The heatness that I feel. It's not acidic air. The heatness.
Kausu Lee was left with severe burns and now fears for his future.
I move here. I go to hustle for my family. I have this kind of accident. Yeah, I think my life is finished.
Incidents like this are causing deep concern, with locals now turning on each other at sea as competition grows over these waters. And who should be allowed to fish here?
I think there should be a civilized way to handle that thing than to jump in one another on, in the sea waters to fight like that. It's very dangerous. So all these things is happening. It's a sea war.
Local fishermen believe their livelihoods are now under threat and have no choice but to act. They say industrial trawlers are fishing closer and closer to shore, violating their waters. The Endura brothers claim to have lost more than half of their nets in recent years and blame the government's decision to reopen its waters to foreign-owned vessels in 2017.
This new government. These trawlers are rampant here. Before they were upside, 15-20 kilometers up, but now they used to come up to 3-4 kilometers down here fishing. This is why they are destroying our nets.
Gambia's government has been trying to do more to calm the waters. It now requires foreign vessels operating offshore to carry a quota of local crew. It's also using the Navy to crack down on illegal fishing, but it's poorly resourced and relies on international support. Local fishermen say the government must do more to protect their rights and their futures, as this fight over Gambia's waters threatens to pull their communities apart.
Right, so Gambian fishermen say foreign trawlers are now fishing just a few kilometers from the shore. I spoke to Dr. Ifesinachi Okafor-Yarwood, a lecturer in sustainable futures at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. She's also a Pew Marine Fellow. I asked her if the law about who can fish where is clear enough, or if enforcement is simply too weak.
The law is clear for many countries, including the Gambia, and I think you've actually said it all. The issue is a problem of enforcement. A lot of the countries in West and Central Africa, including the Gambia, have limited monitoring, surveillance, and control. So it becomes a case of having a law and then not being able to fully implement the law. And the people are now beginning to act as vigilantes because, one, they feel that the government are not doing something about it. But also, secondly, some of them feel that there is some sort of element of corruption, that people have been paid to turn a blind eye. Because even with the limitations of our navies, our Coast Guard, our fisheries authorities, surely the close proximity of these activities to shore would mean that it should be easier for them to see these vessels and then do something about their activities. But so for the fisher folks, who are now taking action, it could be that for them, they feel that these industrial vessels are continuing to incur into areas that is reserved for them because of some sort of corrupt practices that is happening. But there are definitely challenges with monitoring, surveillance, and control in the Gambia, as well as in select countries in West Africa.
The Gambia is relatively, small country, but relatively stable, right? So if this is even happening in the Gambia, I mean, what about countries like, Somalia, arguably less stable country with an even longer coastline?
Illegal fishing is something that is, in Somalia, for example, has been traced and connected to the threats of piracy in the Red Sea. So historically, at the fall of the Barre regime in the early 1990s, I believe 1994, illegal fishing by foreign vessels and illegal toxic waste dumping, by foreign vessels has some of the examples that has been cited as justification for piracy in the Red Sea. And then if you come to the Gulf of Guinea, specifically in Nigeria's Niger Delta, even though this is not necessarily linked to illegal fishing, but you can also see the connection between degradation of the ocean's environment and the deprivation and the sort of helplessness by coastal communities feeling that their government is not doing something, and the militancy that they're moved to piracy in the Red Sea in that part of the world. And so this is not the first time we're seeing a connection between frustration, a feeling of selflessness or helplessness, and people taking actions that inadvertently have a negative implication on the security of their state, but also on their own personal security, because sometimes if you're trying to attack vessels, you might also end up hurting yourself in the process.
Right. I mean, look, from all that I've gathered from what you're saying, you seem to be suggesting that some foreign trawlers don't necessarily stick to the rules of engagement. And again, it just seems to me that we're describing a systematic and widespread theft, so to speak, of Africa's fish stocks and marine resources. Who really is profiting from all of this?
Unfortunately, the people that are profiting are the distant water fishing vessels, the distant water fishing nations. In 2017, and I'll read from a paper, a research that was published in 2017 noted that 6 West African countries, Mauritania, Senegal, the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, and Sierra Leone, lost $2.3 billion annually to illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Obviously, the clandestine nature of this threat makes it almost difficult for us to actually ascertain the actual amount. But if this figure based on reconstruction is what they are telling us, it tells you that actually the financial cost of illegal fishing is significantly high. In 2016, a report from the World Bank noted, and they were writing in 2016, that in the last decade, that the income of artisanal fishers in West Africa have reduced by 40%. If they were writing in 2016 and saying that, What is it now, especially if you take into account the impact of pollution and the impact of climate change? So essentially, and unfortunately, the people that are benefiting are the distant water fishing vessels. The people that are benefiting are the distant water fishing nations, such as those from Asia, specifically China, such as those from entities like the European Union, who are either signing sustainable fisheries partnership agreement with countries in West Africa, and in the case of countries like China and South Korea, they are benefiting through their fisheries different agreement, but also fisheries licensing agreement that allows them to plunder the resources in exchange for peanut, because what they pay in comparison to what they get is unfortunately very very small in comparison to the actual compensation they pay to the government.
Right. I mean, it's interesting what you're saying. So on paper, it seems like this is supposed to be sustainable and supposed to be benefiting all sides, but what actually comes out of it is not that. It's actually far from that. And this is exactly why we're now seeing violent confrontations at sea, in some cases arson attacks and rammings. At what point does this evolve from a fisheries issue to a security crisis?
It is already a security crisis. If you look at different conversations at the UN security levels or UN Security Council level, actually this year, the UN Secretary General talked about a more holistic approach to addressing maritime security threats. And he highlighted specifically the root causes approach. In 2023, the UN Peacebuilding Commission talked about maritime security in the Gulf of Guinea, of which the Gambia is a country in the Gulf of Guinea. And they also talked about the root causes approach. They are recognizing that to be able to solve security threats at sea, including threats like piracy and robbery at sea, we also need to look at threats to livelihoods of coastal communities, threats to livelihood of millions of Africans that rely on ocean's resources. And so if you're not addressing that, unfortunately, people would end up becoming hopeless prey in the hands of criminal network. And sometimes it might manifest by taking advantage of their knowledge of the sea to act as informant, to act as navigators. And in extreme cases, as we're seeing in relation to irregular migration to Europe, some of them actually abandon fishing because there's nothing else for them to do and risk their life to go to Europe through the Mediterranean. So already it is a security issue, and certain governments have already actually stipulated it as a maritime security threat.
So solutions are definitely needed because there's so much at stake here. We're talking about jobs, food, the environment is even affected. What practical steps can countries like the Gambia take right now to protect its waters and its people and end this cycle of conflict, you think?
Well, in 2015, in response to overfishing, the previous government of the Gambia placed a ban on industrial foreign vessels fishing in the country. In 2017, this ban was lifted. As of July this year, the Fisheries Partnership Agreement between the Gambia and the European Union has become dormant because it has expired. Perhaps the Gambia can take cues from Senegal, who failed, or should I say, refused to renew its fisheries partnership agreement when it expired earlier this year or last year, but not renegotiating the agreement this year because they wanted to have a stronger policy on addressing this threat. So perhaps they need to place pause or sort of pause on the agreement to agree on what better way to ensure that they're able to monitor, survey, and control the activities of the vessels they are licensing. Another way could be, thankfully, as of 15th of September this year, the global fisheries subsidies agreement have come into force. This is the one negotiated through the WTO, and perhaps countries can collectively come together and walk the talk on actually putting an end to harmful subsidies, which has in the past allowed vessels to go to countries like the Gambia and others in West Africa to plunder their resources. Right. Another thing could be for the Gambia and their partners to revisit this whole idea of fish meal industry and the way that they operate. Because apart from the fact that vessels also engage in illegal fishing, there's also a problem of overexploitation, taking fish from human to feed fish so that you can feed human. It's very problematic. And so I think there's a need for really broader conversation around transparency, around equity, and around fair sharing of benefits from the fisheries agreement that the Gambia is able to, the money that is able to generate from fisheries agreement or licensing its vessels or licensing agreement with other countries. Sorry.
Right. Dr. Ifesinachi Okafor-Yarwood, lecturer in Sustainable Futures at the University of St. Andrews. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
History was made this week on the waters of Lagos Lagoon as Africa hosted its first ever all-electric powerboat Grand Prix. The two-day E1 Series event featured teams piloting the sleek battery-powered boats known as racebirds, which glide above the water to reduce drag and emissions. Team Brazil claimed its first victory of the season as Lagos became the fifth city to host the championship. The sport has attracted celebrity backers like Rafael Nadal, Will Smith, and Didier Drogba, who attended the race. The season finale is set for Miami this November. E1 organizers say they hope to return to Nigeria with the Lagos government estimating up to $100 million in potential tourism revenue. Pretty cool stuff. That's how we end the show. For more of our stories, go to dw.com/Africa or visit us on social media. See you next time. Bye for now.